Hi, this is Hall of Famer Eric Dickerson, and you're listening to the Harris Highlight Show. Enjoy it.
Na 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 na.
Coming to you live from downtown Phoenix, this is Season 2, Episode 6 of the Harris Highlight Show. Joining me this week are college football analyst Josh Schaefer, Lyle Goldstein, and our executive producer Brady Klain, and I am your host for the evening, Blake Harris. Gentlemen, how are we on this lovely Sunday evening?
Doing well. Yesterday's ASU game was hype. It was a great weekend of college football. It was a great weekend of NFL football. But I do have one question before we continue. Blake, every show you say I will be your host for the evening, but you continue to host the show every single week. So that's my biggest concern. So
I just haven't changed my script over the last year. So
okay, makes sense.
I might want to be on that.
I'm doing pretty well. Like Josh said, a pretty great game yesterday. I think I might not hear the end of it come 10 minutes from now, but we'll see.
He won't.
No, you won't. It's going to be pretty good, Lyle. I think we got some good stuff planned for you.
Going based off the script, which I never change, guys, this week is sponsored by SeatGeek. Head on over to SeatGeek.com, enter the promo code Harris Highlights, and you'll receive $20 off your first order. We mention this every week that everyone's been using the code. One of my buddies, who's WTD Productions, was actually at the game last night from Oregon, got his tickets using the code.
Question, does WTD mean win the day?
It does.
That's disappointing.
What the duck?
Who knows? So yes, go ahead and save some money. And also my parents, they went to the Dodgers game today. They were going to use the code, but I said, no, save it for the playoffs. And they said, all right.
I thought you said they spent it on the tickets to come see the ASU-USC game.
Oh, no, my mom did on her account, but now for my dad's account, he's doing it as well. We're trying to get as much discounts as we can. Also, guys, this is the final week we are doing the Pro Football Focus giveaway. Pro Football Focus goes in-depth and gives you NFL player grades and position ranks, as well as fantasy projections, rankings, and tools. Now, Lyle, this could have been beneficial for you this week for fantasy, to say the least. They also have tons of NFL draft coverage. On top of that, they have lots of great articles as well. Inside joke, Josh is beating Lyle by 50 points currently at the moment in fantasy. Their analysts spend over 50 hours per game generating 140 plus data points on every single play. This is the best website if you're a football fan. You gotta love it. If you want a free subscription, this is what you gotta do. Head on over to Twitter, hit me up with a follow, and slide into my DMs and tell me why you want the subscription and how you would use it. And that's all you got to do. The contest ends October 1st, so make sure you get on that. All right, guys, all the promos are out of the way. Now we can talk some college football. I don't know where to begin. Do we want to begin with the games that happened this past week, or get into this new AP poll that came out? Because this is a very interesting AP poll that has a lot of discussion. So
I said
AP
yes to both.
All right, so Brady, I'll let you decide which one we want to go with first.
Let's go the AP poll, because that's what you have in your hand right now.
All right, let's start with the AP poll first.
He's already decided that doesn't
now,
it doesn't matter.
It's already in my hands.
He didn't really
now,
care.
to no surprise, what kind of surprise? Remember I was talking about Josh, and we thought, what is going to happen with the top 5? Who's going to be moving? The top 5 did not change at all. And then going down the list, that is where there are some major changes, especially in the top 10, because hi Georgia, hi TCU, you guys are officially in the top 10. Guys, 2 teams coming out of nowhere, 7 and 9 respectively. What do you think about these 2 teams climbing and hitting the top 10?
Well, I think that TCU is very deserving of a top 10 ranking. I would have put them right around 9 or 10. So in the AP poll, they have them at a 9. So I think very deserving for that. I think they beat up on a very good Oklahoma State team. I'm still a big fan of what Oklahoma State brings to the table. I'm still a big fan of Mason Rudolph. However, TCU came in and they showed him who's boss. On the other hand, who are we missing? Georgia. We have Georgia coming in, and we had both talked about earlier on the show and in this season, and I believe Lyle said the same thing. I don't remember what Brady said, but we all picked them to win that division in the SEC. So I think Georgia's a very good football team, very competitive. I was impressed with how Notre Dame hung with them. So I'm impressed with those 2 teams. I think they're both deserving of a ranking in the top 10. The only really interesting ranking that I was looking to see was where they had Penn State, USC, and UW. And the reason was because I thought Penn State and USC both played terribly early in the game, pulled away at the end. Same thing with Clemson. I thought Clemson and USC
and
were
Oklahoma.
Yeah, but I think well, that's the thing. Everybody's going to have those games where, especially for top 10 teams, you're going to have those games where you get a scare against a good team that probably does not deserve to be ranked in the top 25. And you saw that with Clemson, Penn State, and USC, all playing good teams that weren't in the top 25. So I don't think there's a whole lot to take away from that. But I told you, if USC doesn't pull away in the fourth quarter, I'm putting them at 7 or 8. And they did pull away. Cal got a late touchdown, which was, in my opinion, an obvious offensive pass interference that did not get called. And Twitter thought the same thing I did. But for Penn State to battle back the way they did just like USC last week, that was pretty much the exact same thing I saw from USC against Texas. Trojans pulled it out. Clemson definitely pulled it out at the end. So I think this is the first week, I might have felt this way last week, this is the first week in several years where I have thought that the AP poll top 10 in week 4 was 100% accurate. I have no complaints with really anything in the top 25. Nowhere I see anything wrong with it.
Well, man, Josh kind of just wrapped it up all in one kind of segment, didn't he? Well, no worries. Well, going back to TCU and Georgia, TCU, I got a little different perspective on this than you. They surprised me. I did not think they were living up to the hype of where they were ranked, especially last week. But they play Oklahoma State. They're playing Oklahoma State on the road, and they come in and beat them by 13 points. Kenny Hill had a pretty nice game. This kid, Darius Anderson, their running back, 160 yards with 3 touchdowns. All of a sudden, TCU's looking like the front runner in the Big 12. And then going to Georgia, I talked about a couple weeks ago how this defense is pretty unreal. And now we're starting to see their top recruit quarterback and freshman Jake Fromm jump onto the scene as well. I mean, the kid threw for 201 yards and 2 touchdowns in the last game. They beat Mississippi State 31-3. And this is a Mississippi State team who Blake was very high on. And last weekend, they embarrassed LSU 37-3, and now they get held to 3 measly points. Like I said, Georgia is my slam dunk pick to win the SEC East. I think they're the front runner on that side of the conference right now, and I think they're very, very deserving of a top 10 spot.
I'm going to go back and remind you guys what I said week 1. We said, what's the biggest underdog team that you could see jumping up here? And I was like, you know what? TCU.
You did say that.
I said TCU. And what are they sitting at now? They're sitting pretty at number 9. Hey, like I said, TCU. But here's this. This is the big thing. Florida State today, or this past week, fell out of the top 25 for the first time since, I believe, 2015. And they are one of 8 teams in all 130 teams left in college football that have not won a game. Baylor's another one of those teams as well. But you have to think about this. They've only played 2 in comparison to a lot of these other schools that have played 3 or 4 games. So seeing Florida State drop out doesn't come to a surprise to many, but they haven't won a game yet. They're one of 8 teams in all of college football that haven't.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be my next point. But really quickly, Georgia's 7, TCU at 9. I love it. I think they deserve it. But Florida State, I was talking with this, I think it was Josh, maybe Lyle, or I talked about a lot of people about this yesterday. And after they lost, I said, without a doubt, they should not be in the top 25. Are they a top 25 team in the country? Yes, they are without a doubt. Maybe even a top 20 team in the country. But Florida State, you're 0-2. Brady, I think you just said 8 teams. 8 teams currently don't have a win. Yeah, they should have played a few more games. They didn't because of the hurricane. I'm looking at the teams right now that don't have wins, and they are terrible teams. But you just cannot reward a team that is 0-2 and have them in the top 25. And it wasn't like they barely missed the top 25, guys. I'm looking at the other teams that received votes. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're ranked the 29th team according to the AP poll. So I think that was a bold move, bold strategy call, and let's see how it pays off. But they'll definitely be back. But I don't know, because they do have a very tough ACC schedule. But I was very surprised that they actually went through with it. But I'm happy to see that.
I think you touched on it perfectly. They are a good football team. I still firmly believe that they are one of the better teams in the ACC conference. However, and I touched on it a minute ago, as soon as I said this, I didn't get a chance to explain because I knew that I had rambled on forever and I knew everybody else deserved a chance to speak. I wanted to touch on this shortly after. I said that I had no complaints with the top 25. However, I did not touch on Florida State not being in it, even though they are good enough to still be in it. The reason they're not is because they're 0-2. Yes, they haven't played enough games, which is unfortunate. Yes, they're winless. That's the reason why they're not in it. It's not because they're not good enough. It's just that they haven't proven that they deserve to be in it. I still think they're a good team, and as do I think a lot of people. but they need to string some wins together. Yes, they lost to a very good team in Bama. I know they're injury riddled too. They need to get a win before we put them back in.
See, I don't agree with that. You guys know how I feel about this, about the whole AP poll and dropping teams an absurd amount. And I get that Florida State's 0-2, like you said. But they did lose to Bama. They've only played 2 games, and they were at number 12. We're not talking about a team that was at 19 and lost their second game. These guys dropped 17 spots in the rankings.
Well, the thing you also have to remember is last week LSU was 12. They lost to Mississippi State. That was on the road, I believe it was, and they fell to 25. So they fell 13 rankings. So it's essentially the same thing, except Florida State, they lost at home. I mean, it's a different scenario, but we have seen it back-to-back weeks. Teams have fallen pretty steadily.
I just never agree with it. I don't think you should fall that far for one game. Like I always say, College Football Committee would not drop somebody that far for one loss. You look at Oklahoma State, too. They dropped 9 spots for that loss. This is a team who last week I had in my top 4 of the college football playoff, and I still believe it could happen if they run the table. But you look at some of these teams ahead of Oklahoma State, I think they're better than everybody 10 through 14. They're probably better than Michigan, too. So the fact that they dropped 9 spots for one loss, I don't agree with. This is why I think the AP poll is flawed, and I don't take a lot of this stuff that seriously until the real college football rankings come out.
Now, we got some interesting rankings near kind of the middle tier. We got Washington State all the way up to 16. That's got to be the highest they've been in who knows how long. Then you got South Florida at 18, San Diego State up to 19. Then you got the Utah Utes all the way at 20. And this week, cracking into the rankings, we got Notre Dame at 22. We got West Virginia at 23. But yeah, guys, Josh, he perfectly said it like 5 minutes ago when he said, I think the AP poll got it right. I think they got it right. I mean, looking down the list, as Lyle mentioned, I do believe there are a lot of teams that are better than Oklahoma State. But as we've said in weeks past, the AP poll doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter until you get to the real college football playoff rankings when it truly counts.
Wait, a lot of teams are better than Oklahoma State?
Yes. I mean, Oklahoma State's better than a lot of teams. There we go. That's what I meant. But guys, really quickly, touching on the other teams that got votes, we got, as I mentioned, Florida State. They're hanging there at 29. Texas Tech, a team in which ASU lost to, they are borderline top 25. So ASU, although we are 2-2, we'll touch upon them a little bit later. Our losses are to what? A number 18 ranked number 19 ranked San Diego State, and a number 28 ranked Texas Tech. So our losses are good losses. So that's definitely assuring. Also, really quickly, NC State, they're getting votes. Duke, undefeated. How about that? Rounding out the list, we got good old Memphis. I know Josh is very high on Memphis. He's one of their biggest fans there. Iowa, Stanford, Cal, Colorado, UCF, Minnesota, Kansas State, Oregon, Tennessee, and Wake Forest all getting votes. But guys, before we move on to the games this week, anything else you want to touch upon this AP poll?
Go Irish, cracking the top 25.
Yeah, that'll last for 1 week because they play powerhouse Miami, Ohio next week. That'll be a tough one in South Bend.
Don't hate the Red Hawks, Blake.
Well, I'm hating for sure. Also, really quickly, guys, my thing is Michigan at 8. I said that Purdue was going to beat them. And up until midway in that third quarter, maybe in the fourth quarter, it looked like it was going to happen. Purdue looked like the dominant team, and then Michigan just took away in the fourth quarter. But I still... Michigan is this year's Clemson, guys. I am not high on them. I don't think their defense is fantastic. That offense is a joke.
They're winning the national championship.
Like I said,
yep, they are.
Wilton Spate for Heisman.
Hey, Blake, you also said that Vanderbilt-Bama would be a close game.
Okay, here's my defense.
You literally told we're watching the game we're watching a different game on TV, and little ticker tape comes across the bottom, and you're like, see, they're only down by 7, and then Alabama's score flashes red, and it goes up 14, and we're like, 7-point game, and he's like, whatever, it'll be close.
How is it possible that Colorado State, they're down to Bama by like 14 at the half, and they end up losing by about 20, but yet you get a team like Vanderbilt, who just beat a good Kansas State team, a team that's undefeated at home, and they lose by 60.
I have the answer for you, Blake. Colorado State is a powerhouse.
That's true. The Rams are a good team. I don't know how that happened. I mean, speaking of that game, there were a lot of games that I was completely wrong on. We'll get to that later in the show. But yeah, AP Bowl, Michigan. Well, for all you Wolverine fans out there, good luck. I mean, this is good news because essentially you're winning the national championship since I'm completely hating on you guys.
The Harris highlights curse. It's proven right last year.
Yeah, it's 1 for 1. Let's see if it's 2 for 2. But guys, there were a lot of great games this week. But
you should hate on ASU.
Let's first off start with the Arizona State Oregon game. I woke up this morning with like 6 DMs saying, "Wait, what?" ASU beat Oregon. I know that comes as a surprise to a lot of you. We all picked Oregon to win last week, but in our own little group here at ASU, we all do our own pick'ems, and I was the only one in about 12 that picked ASU, but Josh, he did say he wished he could change his pick, but he didn't. But guys, ASU got the win.
Hey, I got second in that group.
He got second, but doesn't make anything because you still
Point
beat Oregon.
differential doesn't
Guys,
mean anything.
We somehow beat Oregon. Josh, what were the keys to victory? How did we pull it off?
Bottom line, I think ASU's defense, despite giving up 35 points, I thought was the difference maker. The offense, like we saw against Texas Tech, was revitalized. The offense, I didn't think was going to be the problem. They came out on their first offensive drive and scored points, and that was huge. They also had an onside kick and got the ball back. That
surprise onside
huge surprise.
Kick.
That was huge, and that was in the first half. They had an onside kick, but more importantly, they stopped Herbert on the first drive of the game. That was the biggest thing, was that he was stopped on the first drive of the game, threw an incompletion on his first pass, I believe. Manny Wilkins was 6 for 6 before he threw an incompletion. I know that doesn't mean anything. He's still one of the only quarterbacks in the FBS who hasn't thrown a pick yet, which is huge because he hasn't been the problem. But still, the biggest problem for Arizona State, the secondary is They were really good against Herbert, I thought. But bottom line, the offensive line's terrible. The offensive line is terrible, and I know Lyle doesn't like our running game, especially DeMario Richard, but you can't get on him when there are no holes to open up, and that's the same thing. You know, I said it to a friend today who plays for San Diego State. If Rashad Penny was on Arizona State, I think he would improve the running game, but ultimately, I don't think he would be as good because our offensive line is always battles with injuries and just, to put it plainly, does not compete to the level at which they should.
Yes, the running game has been lackluster, but I'll tell you this. Throughout the first 2 games of the season, ASU gave up 11 sacks. I don't remember what the number was in the third one. I think we gave up 4 or 5. We only gave up 2 sacks to Oregon.
And they don't get penalties, though.
No.
They never get offensive penalties.
Rarely get penalties, which is great. And last night, we drew Oregon off sides a couple times, which was really good.
Like 5 times,
Manny did a great job running there, but the offensive line against Oregon was the best I've seen them this season so far.
Yeah, I totally agree. And bottom line, I think, even though
we only gave up 2 sacks and one of them was a scramble.
Yes, that's true. And Manny, I know he scrambled a few times. People want him to get rid of the ball when he can't do anything with the play. But last night was, I think, the most impressed I have ever been with Manny Wilkins as ASU starting quarterback. I thought he was awesome.
I mean, he still hasn't thrown an interception, which is pretty crazy. I mean, especially what we saw from him last year. He has made so many strides in his craft, in his game, and this was his most impressive performance I think that I've seen from him so far in my time at ASU. And then 2 other things I want to talk about. The fact that the ASU defense did hold Oregon to just 1 third down conversion on 11 attempts. That was the stat of the night, along with N'Keal Harry. I mean, for all the struggles that ASU has had from in our time here, last year, a little bit this year, N'Keal Harry has been the one sure factor. 7 receptions for 170 yards and a touchdown last night. This guy's a 5-star recruit. He's the best playmaker on the field, and he was a big, big reason for the victory last night.
Lyle had an amazing quote last night. Arizona State is good for 3 things: innovation, hot girls, and N'Keal Harry catching passes. And that's true. Nick, I don't know why we don't throw it to him more often.
Every play.
That's what I was going to say, is it seems like they haven't been throwing the ball to him until last night where he was the main target.
I'll tell you this, the one negative thing about it was third and like 6 with 30 seconds left. You throw the ball and it bounces off of his chest. But
it was a bad play call.
I'll tell you this. The ASU receiving corps has been the most impressive thing on this team because they've had a different receiver get 100 yards in each game this season.
And Humphrey didn't play last
Only
night.
team in college football to do so.
And how about Jalen Harvey? I was just talking about N'Keal Harry. Jalen Harvey had 133 yards receiving last night.
I mean, you guys broke down everything perfectly. I mean, that was a very good take.
Thank you.
Now, the question is, can we keep this alive? We'll touch on that later in the show. But yeah, ASU got it done against Oregon, one of the best games that we've been to while we are here. But guys, the game of the night, without a doubt, that was Penn State and Iowa. We caught the finish of it in the stands, and it was an amazing finish. But I went back and I went through the entire game, and that was a phenomenal game. A defensive game, as if you expect nothing less in the Big Ten. But unreal. Iowa, there's just some, and someone commented on my video this morning saying there's just something about a Saturday night at Iowa with Chris Fowler and Kurt Herbstreit on the call that is just an impossible place to play. And it proved that Penn State almost lost a last-second game-winning touchdown by Trace McSorley. Also, really quickly, when you watch the play, initial thought is, okay, he threw it like 10 yards, great pass. But when you look at the angle of the overhead camera, I don't know
from like McSorley's angle.
I don't know if Josh or Brady saw this. The ball literally goes through 2 Iowa defenders. And I don't even think the guy that caught it wasn't even supposed to catch it. It was supposed to be to the other guy.
He threaded the needle on it.
It was an amazing,
such a tight window.
An amazing throw. But that last drive down the field, they had about a minute 20, minute 30, I think, left to score. He let him down. A huge 4th down conversion. Unreal game. I can't even imagine what it was like being there.
I'll tell you this: when I was watching the game up in the press box at ASU, and they were just showing clips, and when it was 5-3, I thought they superimposed a baseball scorecard on this broadcast because 5 how did they even get the safety? Do you guys know?
I didn't see it.
I didn't see it either.
It was weird. They had Iowa had on the 1 yard line. They did a little toss to the right, and the guy just got tackled in the end zone.
Just got pushed back.
Yeah.
I will tell you this though: Iowa has one of the new coolest trends ever. At the end of the first quarter, there's a children's hospital that overlooks into the stadium, and every single person like flashes their flashlights and waves to the kids in the children's hospital. That is so cool. I loved watching that last night.
It's super unique too, which is what I think is so super cool about it. But also, looking back at this game, bless you, Lyle. Looking back at this game.
Okay, we'll cut that.
No, we're leaving that in. That's funny.
Anyway, looking back at the game, I mentioned it earlier. It reminded me a lot of USC Texas, where as this game's going on, it seems like everyone's rooting for the underdog, which would be Iowa. And it seems like the main focal point of the game, obviously, is Iowa. And we get down to it. You get down to the final drive of the game, and your star quarterback says, I got this. And he gets it done. You look at Trace McSorley and what Sam Darnold have done these last 2 weeks, and it's the same thing. Their numbers from that game might not have been very good. Of course, I just pulled up McSorley's box score. I watched a good portion of the game. I know Blake went back and watched the whole thing. But if I'm looking at the box score and that's it, as Brady drops his water bottle, this segment is unraveling in front of my eyes. As I was saying, if you're looking at the box score, if you're not looking at how these two quarterbacks played, but meaning McSorley and Darnold in their games against Iowa and Texas respectively, looking only at the box score, which is something you should never do, it looks like they had a bad game. McSorley was 31 of 48, not terrible, with 284 yards, not terrible, with a touchdown and an interception. You want to know what his one touchdown was? The game winner. His one touchdown was the game-winning touchdown. But he pieced together that final drive. He pieced together that touchdown play, just like Darnold got the ball back in his hands with 40 seconds left and went all the way down the field and scored a touchdown and then led his team to an overtime victory. These two quarterbacks, I think, are very similar. I think Darnold gets a majority of the hype for a good reason. But there's a reason why I think McSorley is an underdog in college football. And he showed on Saturday night that he deserves more attention on a national standpoint.
To open up the broadcast, Kirk Herbstreit said McSorley was the best player in college football in the country.
Really?
Yeah.
And if Herbie says it, you got to take it into fruition.
He also said that we were making the playoff a few years ago, and by us, I mean Arizona State.
And Mike Bercovici was a Heisman sleeper.
Well, I'm not sure how this hasn't been brought up yet, but after that Penn State game, if we didn't have a Heisman frontrunner before last night, we do now. Saquon Barkley, who was a lot of people's preseason pick. The guy had over 300 total yards last night. And you look at his season stats, in 4 games, he has 853 total yards with 6 touchdowns. This guy had 211 rushing yards last night. He's an absolute force, easily the best running back in the country, easily leading Penn State, and he's definitely my front runner through 4 games of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Lyle, you touched on it perfectly. I think he is the Heisman favorite. I mean, it's a duo right now between McSorley and Barkley. Their seasons have been phenomenal. Now, hopefully, they can lead Penn State to an undefeated season or maybe a one-loss season, because I think it's their Heisman Trophy to lose at this point. But it is still early. But as Brady said, the Heisman's won in the first 6 games, so they got 2 games to go to figure that out. But really quickly, guys,
I said it once, and I have to stick to it.
Before we go into the Q&A, let's just talk about a few more games for a little more. The TCU-Oklahoma State game. None of us gave TCU any chance in this game. They came in. They took care of business. They were dominant that entire game. So Oklahoma State loses at home. As Lyle mentioned, they fell 9 spots, which is a tough one. But I don't know how much of the game you guys saw, but There were some plays from Mason Rudolph. There was like this weird interception where he was like getting tackled. He kind of just like let it go, and just one of the defensive linemen caught it. There was like one where they tried doing a little trick play and it was picked off. So Mason Rudolph, like the TCU is a good team, but like Mason Rudolph, a James Washington who did have a great touchdown.
Yeah.
What do you think from them in this game? Because this is Oklahoma State's first true test of the season, and it didn't go well.
Yeah, so it was, like you said, it was their first true test of the season, and they didn't perform as well as I thought they would. I think this is obviously a huge learning experience for them. They're going to bounce back next week. No question. I still think they are a force to be reckoned with in the Big 12. I think now we finally have 3 teams in the Big 12 that we like to look out for, and that's Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and TCU, if we weren't looking out for them already. Rudolph still put up 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he also had 2 interceptions, and he had about 20 incompletions, which is obviously not what you want to see from the guy who was my Heisman frontrunner. Is he out of the Heisman race? Not a chance. Same thing can be said for Lamar Jackson and Sam Darnold or whoever else you want to throw in there who's getting wins. But honestly, I thought, I mean, if you're looking at Hill, I think he was the better quarterback to an extent because he was able to get the job done on a certain standpoint. But I still think my player of the game was James Washington, even despite the loss. I thought he looked awesome. For not being he's built like a running back, not a receiver, and he's still one of the fastest guys on the field. So I love watching him play. In terms of Oklahoma State, I don't think they're out of this yet. I think they're fine. I still think they're going to compete for a playoff spot. I don't see a whole. Obviously, it's a tough loss, and they're losing a lot. And I think they're losing a lot of respect from people around the country. But ultimately, on a national standpoint, and looking how early we are in the season, they're not losing a whole lot.
Well, they're going to have to run the table. But the nice thing for Oklahoma State is, for those who don't remember, the Big 12 now has a conference championship. So most likely, if Oklahoma State wants to find a way to squeak into the college football playoff, they're going to have to win out, and meaning they're probably going to have to beat Oklahoma twice when they play them on November 4th, and then again, most likely, in the Big 12 championship. And I think they can do it. With the explosive offense they have, I think they can do it, but we'll just wait and have to see how it unfolds.
I think this is a good wake-up call for Oklahoma State. As I mentioned, a lot of people were pinning them as favorites, and now TCU comes in, upsets them. So now they really got to be careful because everyone was thinking, okay, they have one slip-up chance against Oklahoma. The rest, they have to go perfect. So now they honestly really got to go perfect the rest of the way. That Oklahoma game is a must-win for them. And if there's like just one, Big 12 game like a Texas Tech or one of these other teams that comes in and they beats them, Oklahoma State season is going to be done. Also, one other game just to quickly touch up on, and that's that Georgia-Mississippi State game. I was all hype up on Mississippi State. I didn't really know much about Georgia. They did have that squeak victory against Notre Dame. But on that first drive, I don't know if you guys saw it, they just did this flea flicker for about 60 yards. And Lyle, what'd you say the name of the quarterback was on Georgia that's coming in?
Jake Fromm.
This guy is a stud. He has an arm. And is he a true freshman or is he a redshirt?
I'm pretty sure he's a true freshman.
He's true.
He looked phenomenal. And Georgia, like I said, we all picked them to win, was it the SEC East at the beginning of the season. And I think they can. I'm just excited to see them go against Bama because I truly think in the SEC, this is Bama's only true test. I mean, I thought it was going to be Vanderbilt, but, that didn't go as planned. But 31-3, which is still phenomenal considering the Mississippi State the previous week. I think they held LSU to maybe 3 points in their game. I'm not really sure on that. But yeah, so I mean, that was shocking. But guys, just quickly, like 1 minute, what was your thoughts on that Georgia win?
I keep saying it. Georgia has arguably the best defense in the country. They've let up just 47 points in the 4 games they've played so far. You have Jake Fromm, who has really come on to center stage, and especially on Saturday against Mississippi State. And what you got to remember is they have 2 quarterbacks now who are easily up to the task because Jacob Eason got hurt early in the year. He was the #1 quarterback recruit coming into the 2016 season. And then they have arguably the best running back duo in the country between Nick Chubb, who had 2 touchdowns in Saturday's game, as well as Sony Michel. So this is a Georgia team that's very complete, very well-rounded, and with a great defense, and I think they're set to make a run.
All right, guys, it is now time for the Q&A. Like I said, lots of great games this past weekend. Chattanooga finally got their first win of the season. They beat VMI 63-7. Josh, will you tell us who good old VMI is?
The Virginia Military Institute.
Wow.
They were in our worst of the worst last year.
Were they? Yeah, that was...
Yep.
Very glad. But yeah, so we were doing the Q&A this week, guys. Last week we just had callers. This week we're going to be taking callers as well, but we will also be answering your questions as well. Brady, the video's been up for about 2 or 3 hours or so, and it already has like 110 comments.
We got 112 comments so far, Blake.
Man, like I said, I wish we had enough time to get to all of them. But Brady, while we wait for our first caller, let's go into one of the shorter questions and answer that.
Quick thoughts on college game day being in New York City in Times Square.
At first, I didn't like it, but the more I think about it, the more I love it. And we are currently getting a caller, guys. Let's do this. How's it going, Spencer?
It's good, man. How are y'all?
Oh, we're doing great. All right, well, welcome to the show. First things first, my man. Where are you calling from? How old are you, and who's your team?
I'm calling from Baytown, Texas. It's a suburb of Houston. I'm 24, and my team is LSU.
Interesting. Quick question. Why LSU if you're in Texas?
That's actually an interesting story. So I grew up a University of Texas fan, but LSU was just always my second. They're just kind of like my second team. And then when I went to college, I met my wife at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. And she was already kind of an LSU fan because she was supposed to go to LSU. And then I'd always kind of liked them, so I just kind of became an LSU fan.
Ah, nice. A true love story. We love it. But Spencer, my man, what do you got for us this week?
My question for y'all is, okay, so we've seen teams like, let's say, a Western Michigan against USC, or like UL Lafayette against Texas A&M. And like, let's say last night it was Louisiana Tech versus South Carolina. Like these lower, smaller schools, do you think that them doing good against bigger schools is a sign that the smaller schools are getting better, or that the bigger schools are getting worse?
That's a fantastic question. I'm going to let Josh take this one first.
Yeah, I think that... See, it's really tough. I think it's that the smaller schools are getting better, and I think one of them is San Diego State, because I mean, we have teams such as San Diego State and Boise State and teams like that who are they're not small schools. They just have relatively small football programs. But within the last 10 to 15 years, we see schools like this get bigger, primarily Boise State, because there was a time when Boise State wasn't an FBS school, and now they are. And now I wouldn't say they're a powerhouse, but they can contend with a lot of other schools in the country. They're sucking it up right now, but they're still a solid team. So I think it's that these smaller schools are indeed getting better, but I think it also helps that they're playing a powerhouse team that makes them step up, and it's a source of like motivation, you know?
I definitely think they're starting to get better. I mean, you look at teams like San Diego State, like Boise State, like Western Michigan, who have beaten some top-notch teams over the last couple of years. I think one that still stands out to me the most was North Dakota State a couple of years ago when they had Carson Wentz and they took down Iowa, who had a top-notch defense with Desmond King back when he was an All-American. So that shows that even an FCS team like North Dakota State can compete against some top-notch talent. So I think it's definitely a sign of these lower-tier schools are on the rise.
I mean,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think Josh, hit it perfectly about how everyone's getting more competitive. But I think it's when you have a smaller team like a San Diego State. Granted, they are a very good team, but when they come and they're playing in Arizona State on the road, like you're going to get their absolute best. I mean, I kind of want to reference like in basketball, every team that's playing the Warriors, they're going to be given their absolute hardest, whereas if they're playing like the Milwaukee Bucks, they're not even going to be trying half hard. So I think that's the case, but I also really think a lot of these lower tier teams are getting better. They're getting a lot of good recruits, a lot of guys who want to kind of stay close to home, and it's just more of a roundabout type thing. But that's my 2 cents, but I think that's the best question we've ever got.
I think it's a really good one, and I wrote San Diego State on the big whiteboard in here, and I shouldn't have wrote it down before all these guys had to answer. But I mean, San Diego State's that one school that this year has made a name for themselves. That's not a Power 5 team, obviously, but coming in and now sitting ranked at, 19th this week in the AP poll. So they've definitely made a name for themselves this year so far. And we saw the last couple seasons with Donnell Pumphrey at SDSU also. So he's definitely been a major factor of putting them on a major map. And that's added to their team being like this season. So I think it's the smaller schools getting better, getting these unknown guys that are just able to come in and take over the country.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Just for a little bit of reference, I was talking to Blake on Snapchat the other day, just let y'all know, a couple of guys that I went to school with actually play football at Arizona State.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is one of them good old Dylan Sterling Cole?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I went to high school with him.
That is, we see him a lot. I guess he knew someone at the downtown campus last year, so we would always see him. So Dylan Sterling Cole, he's one of our personal. We've never talked to the guy, but once I was at the gym and I was doing the weights. I think I was about 150 pounds or something like that, one of the highest weights.
Right,
and,
you're not that strong.
And he came up to me and he asked if he can go after me, and that's a story I get to tell to all my friends, that me and the backup quarterback lifted weights together. But that's a great story.
Jamarcus Rhodes, I think he's a defensive back.
He's good. He's been playing well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
also,
a small world.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Another guy that I didn't go to school with him, but he went to my high school, is Earl Thomas, safety for the Seattle Seahawks.
That's right up my alley. That's music to my ears.
Yeah, Lyle is a diehard Seahawks fan. But Spencer, thank you for coming on. I know it's a little late over there, but we appreciate you coming on, and hopefully your LSU Tigers can figure it out and make a little late season push this year.
I appreciate you, Blake. It was an honor to be on the show.
I appreciate it, my man. I'll be talking to you soon.
Yes, sir.
That was honestly probably the best phone call we've ever gotten, one of the best Q&As we've ever had. Lyle's so hyped that he knows Earl Thomas.
I never told you guys about the Dylan Sterling Cole thing just because I wanted to get your initial reaction, and it was priceless. But guys, while we wait for another caller, quickly going back to the original question that was asked.
College game day in New York City.
My thing is, I loved it.
It was different. I thought it was good. It just, to me, didn't seem like a college game day. However, this was probably the best week of signs easily of this season, maybe even last year, because you are at a neutral site when there's no game going on and you have a mix of fans. That's great.
And we are currently getting another call. Let's take it right now. Jake?
Hello?
How's it going, Jake?
Good. How are y'all? Can y'all hear me good?
We can hear you loud and clear, Jake. All right, first question for you, my man. Where are you calling from? Who's your team?
I'm calling from Fort Worth, Texas, and I enjoy TCU because I live around here, but I'm a Tennessee fan at heart.
Oh, nice. Well, I'm sure the vibe's going well for TCU after this past weekend in Tennessee. All right, we'd like to see that one as well. All right, Jake, what do you got for us this week?
I actually have two questions.
No
the
worries.
first one's about the SEC.
All right, let's hear it.
Georgia put the pain down on Mississippi State this weekend, and then they had that really good game against Notre Dame. I think it was 2 weeks ago. So do you think Georgia, what do you think their shots are? Do you think they can beat Bama? Do you think they can go all the way?
I've actually touched on this a lot. I think they're definitely going to take the SEC East. I think they're a very, very strong team. But I think come late November, early December, when it gets to that SEC title game, I think you're going to see kind of a similar trend as we've seen the last few years, where that SEC team, they get there and they kind of get stomped on by Bama, because I think Alabama is a step above the rest of the country. So I think Georgia is a top 10 team in the country, but I don't think they match up with the Crimson Tide.
I think they absolutely win the SEC East, and I think they absolutely compete with Alabama. Do I think they'll win? I think it's too early to tell. I think we do have a little bit of time to kind of figure that out. But for Georgia, I really like what I've seen so far. They're deserving of a top 10 ranking, and I think in terms of playoff contention, I don't think they get in. I don't know how well they'll compete, but they're definitely one of the top 10 teams in the country, in my opinion.
We talked about this a little earlier in the recording of the show, and Lyle and I mainly said was the running back core of Georgia is the thing that keeps them in games. And also from their quarterback, the true freshman, is able to just stay poised and stay composed inside the pocket, and when need be, he can scramble out. So he's one of the best young dual-threat quarterbacks in the country. So I think they're one of the most overall best teams, but I think they do give Alabama a fight, because we haven't seen Alabama really on national TV since game one, and there's really no hype around them right now. They're just staying at number one, and there's no question about it.
I'm going to make it short and sweet. I think they take the East, and I think they put up a fight against Bama. They're one of the only teams, they might be the only team, I think, that's knocked off two ranked opponents already in the year with Notre Dame, when I think Notre Dame was ranked 20th, or maybe 19th.
I think they were 24.
24, and then this past week with Mississippi State. So I think Georgia's definitely the real deal. But Josh touched on it. It's been 4 weeks, so we're going to have to wait and see.
And before we let you go real quickly, I know that you're a Tennessee fan, and we got that game coming up very soon. That's one of the games that I've had, circled for a while, was this Tennessee-Georgia game, because I think it's going to be great just like it was last year. But with it being in Tennessee, I think Tennessee can take on Georgia and compete with them, but I still think Georgia's going to be the team to beat other than Alabama in the SEC.
All right, and I agree with you there. I think Tennessee can compete, but we're definitely not looking quite as good as last year. We got some stuff to figure out on both sides of the ball. And then my second question is basically the same thing, except for TCU, since they really showed up against Oklahoma State this weekend. Do you think they'll make it to the title game? Do you think they can compete with Oklahoma?
I've been high on TCU since day one. I had them as my main team in college football to watch out for. That wasn't ranked at the beginning of the year. That could make a major splash, and now they've jumped up. They're sitting at number 9 right now after being mid-teens last week. But TCU has a great shot, and I could see them going up and going against Oklahoma at the end of the season.
To be honest, I think TCU is a strong team for now, but we've seen this trend with TCU before where they have a really strong first half and kind of die off toward the second half of the year. And right now I'm a little bit convinced that that's what's going to happen to them come October.
I definitely think that TCU can make a push. I think the Big 12 is going to be a much better conference than we all thought. I mean, Texas Tech looks really good. You got Oklahoma, you got Oklahoma State. And Baylor does not look like they're going to be much at all this year, but you also got like a Kansas State. So there's a lot of tough teams, but after this past weekend, the performance they had against Oklahoma State, I definitely think that they can make a push. Now, if it's against Oklahoma for the Big 12 championship, that's another story, but I definitely think that they could actually get to the Big 12 championship.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you all very much.
Hey, no worries, Shake. You have a good night, and I guess go Horned Frogs and go Volunteers.
All right. Thank you very much.
Have a good night, my man.
Another good caller. I enjoyed that.
Now, I guess the question is, will the next caller be from Texas as well? Are we going to go for the trifecta? All right, but Brady...
You have to get North Texas if you're going to do it.
Oh, I know. Brady, what other questions do we got while we wait for the next caller?
We'll get this one. What is the mecca of college football? So, like, you have the mecca of basketball, obviously Madison Square Garden. I'd say... Football, would you say what, Jerry World right now probably?
If we're
NFL, but what's the mecca of college football?
Whether people believe them to be the best college football program of all time or not, whether you hate them or not, it's the Big House. I think the mecca of college football, it has to be Michigan Stadium.
100% agree. Big House.
I was throwing up my fight on symbol over here because I honestly thought you were going to say USC.
There's no, I mean...
But I could see where the Big House could come into this. I mean, Nebraska could also be thought of as it as well because, I mean, they've sold out all those games. But if you think of one place to go play, I think it'd be the Big House.
I think it's the most iconic. And there are some iconic stadiums in football, such as, I wouldn't even put Nebraska up there. I'd say, obviously, Tennessee, Penn State, Florida State, USC, Ohio State,
Florida,
the Gators. Yeah, I think all of those are very obvious, recognizable stadiums and cathedrals of college football. But if we're looking at Mecca, I think it's Michigan hands down, no question.
I like Michigan as well, but I also would put Notre Dame up there.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be a good one.
I think you have to.
Which game was better this season, Penn State, Iowa, or Texas, USC?
Texas, USC.
Texas, SC.
I'm going to say Texas, SC, because it went to overtime and there was a lot more hype around it.
All right, this one comes from a good pal, Richard Nixon, of course. I didn't know this, actually. So he says, I'm a Giants fan in the NFL and an Arizona Wildcats fan in college.
Oh.
How many more weeks do you think I can last as a fan of either team?
Well, in regards to the New York Giants, you're probably on your last leg. But in regards to the Wildcats, I think they're going to surprise some people this year. I think they're definitely a better team than they were last year. Will they go bowling? We'll have to wait and see. But don't give up on them. But the New York Giants, yeah, bro, it's time to move on.
See, when it comes to Arizona, Blake, I think it would be very hard to not be better than they were last year. They were not a good... Yes, they beat up on ASU, but they were not a good team. And by the end of the season, ASU was not a good team. I think that Arizona is better than they were last year, but I'm not expecting a whole lot from them. At the beginning of the season, I thought ASU could potentially turn some heads in the Pac-12 South, and that's the phrase that I continue to say. At this point, I think the state of Arizona is not going to have a very successful college football season. They might make a bowl game, but there's no way either team's better than 6-6.
I'm not so high on the University of Arizona. I mean, I know they've played a couple close games. I know they played Houston pretty close, but I'm not sold that they're going to contend in the Pac-12. In terms of the Giants, I think they'll honestly bounce back. I think they have too much talent on that defense.
I agree with the Giants side of things, but I was talking to you guys about this last night, or the other night at the ASU football game. U of A has only played one Saturday game. They've played Thursday night and a Friday night. So they've only played one Saturday game, which in my opinion is really weird to start off a season. But you should have given up being a U of A fan a long time ago.
Yeah, that was perfectly well said, Brady.
Thank 90s. You. What'd you say?
In the 90s?
In the 90s? You know, like post Gronk. Like you can cheer for Gronk, and then after that, it's just.
So yeah, I guess late 2000s.
Yeah. If NCAA football video game comes back next year, who's the cover?
Oh,
who's the cover athlete?
Lamar
Saquon.
Jackson.
Saquon.
I'm gonna throw up 3. It's either Saquon, it's Lamar, or it's Darnold. It has to be those 3.
I'm going Simi Cobbs.
Oh.
Well, fine. Then I'm changing my answer to Brandon Wimbush.
Yeah, there you go.
The Chattanooga kicker.
the Brazilian.
Or
guy.
they can just do Legends Edition and put Zane on the cover.
Speaking of Zane, how did ASU pull out the win over Oregon without the great Zane Gonzalez, who couldn't get it done against the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday?
Because we have a new Zane Gonzalez on Arizona State.
If you could see your dream matchup, what 2 teams would it be and what stadium would it be in? And you could be live there.
1, and this is like 2 weeks ago, a USC Texas rematch in the national championship at the Rose Bowl.
Well, there goes my answer.
But if I could like choose any like actual game, I think it would be either going to an Army Navy game or an Ohio State Michigan game at the Big House.
I would say a Notre Dame Alabama national championship at Sun Life Stadium. Oh wait, I saw that live and they lost by 28. So I'm gonna go with a Notre Dame USC championship at the Big House
in South Bend.
How does that make sense though?
It doesn't, but that's the question.
It's your dream.
It's your dream.
See, that's the thing is we're talking about stadiums we want to go to and matchups we want to see. I would love to see any game at Michigan. I would love to see really anything at Tennessee, but I think an attainable goal is in 2 years I want to go to USC Notre Dame in South Bend. That has been a dream of mine since I was a kid. It has nothing to do with USC even. It has to do with it's a Notre Dame game and who's the best team that they're going to play at home. It's going to be USC.
I think all 4 of us should do it.
Let's take a Harris highlights trip and we'll go like a live pregame show from Notre Dame. Because that's in Indiana. Because, I'll find somebody I know at Notre Dame and we can hook them up.
I'm down.
I love it. I'm down.
Want to do it? All right. Mine would probably, I could honestly go back and do that Clemson, Alabama national championship from last year. Take those 2 teams, throw them at like Jerry World or something like that, and I want them to just replay that national championship.
Wasn't it at Jerry World last year?
It was at Raymond James.
Okay.
In Florida.
Okay. Yeah.
But, throw it at Jerry World or somewhere big stadium like that. But that would be a very fun game to go see. And, no matter what the result turns out to be, those 2 teams were a hell of a matchup. Do you guys think San Diego State can make a New Year's Six Bowl being the group of 5 team?
Short and sweet, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. If Chattanooga plays Arizona State at Arizona State, who will you root for?
Both teams.
I think I would wear both as well. I think Brady said this a couple weeks ago, but it's absolutely true that if people that throw Chattanooga questions into the comments for the Q&A, they know they're going to get it asked.
They know they are. That and Zane Gonzalez questions.
Yeah.
Do you think if Notre Dame had beaten Georgia and win the rest of their games this season, they could make it to the college football playoffs?
I still think really quickly, if they somehow win out, they still have a chance to make it to the college football playoff. There's my hot take.
I was going to say, if they were 4-0 right now, they would definitely be in the top 10, especially looking where Georgia is at 7. And I think they can run the table too. If they find a way to beat USC, of course that's going to be a really, really tough game. But if they can find a way to win out, I think they still get in.
Honestly, Blake, I don't even see how that's a hot take. I think that if they win out, they're in already. And that's the thing is, if they win out, I think it's going to be hard to keep a 1-loss Notre Dame team who obviously would have beaten USC by then. How can you keep them out of contention? There's no way.
All right, this one's great.
This is the comment of the week.
This is the comment of the week. How do you guys feel about the Mocs versus the Cox in 2018? Obviously, speaking of Chattanooga versus South Carolina.
So apparently South Carolina is hosting Chattanooga next season. I had no idea until I looked at the schedule, but I think this has to be the newest like trademark quote right here, the Mocs versus the Cox. Now that's going to be a very tough matchup, but I do think the Mocs, they do have the edge over the Cox, but we're going to have to wait and see. I mean, the Cox do look good, but we're just, I can't.
You can't say the Cox look good, can you?
No. But I mean, hopefully next year is the year that the Mocs finally take down an SEC powerhouse.
Of course the Mocs are going to win. You can't sleep on Chattanooga.
And we are getting our third and final caller. Now this one's from Stillwater, Oklahoma. How's it going, Carson?
Good, how about you?
We're doing well, we're doing well. Now first question is actually for you. Where are you calling from and who is your team?
I'm calling from Stillwater, Oklahoma. And well, my favorite team is Oklahoma State, but I also like Notre Dame and Nebraska.
Ooh, interesting. So why that trio right there?
Well, Oklahoma State because I live like 10 minutes from campus, and that's probably where I'm going to college. Notre Dame because my uncle is a Notre Dame fan. He kind of forced it on me a little bit.
Nice.
It was either that or become an OU fan, and I definitely don't want to do that. And Nebraska, I don't know. I've always kind of liked Nebraska.
I like it. That's definitely a unique trio. You're probably the only person in the country that likes those three certain teams. My man, what do you got for us this week?
All right, well, my first question is, so what is your favorite kind of college atmosphere that you've ever been to? Like, it doesn't have to be a college football game. It can be any college game you've ever been to. Like, what's the best atmosphere you've ever felt?
That's a really tough question, and I think for me personally, it's only because I've seen only a handful of college athletic atmospheres. So I think, I mean, there's something about USC games because I grew up going to games. I think the best USC game I've been to was USC Stanford in 2013 when SC had like the 40-yard field goal to win it as time expired. And then for ASU games are different, and I talk about this all the time, and it's because I sit in the student section at the ASU games. If we're not covering it, we sit in the student section. It's not like we're sitting in like the 50-yard line just kicking back. We're standing up and down. We're singing, dancing. The whole game, we're just doing stuff. So I think it's interesting, but I'll go with ASU student section just because I had never been in the student section even in high school because I was always working at the games, and now I get to experience the student section, and it's interesting.
This is now the second time in like 10 minutes I've brought this up. I thought the best atmosphere I'd ever be in was that national championship when I was in 9th grade between Notre Dame and Alabama. But God, was that miserable after the first quarter. So I'm going to say the best atmosphere I've ever been in was the ASU student section last year during the Texas Tech game when Kalen Balazs ran for 8 touchdowns.
You know, I'm different than these guys because I'm not ever in the student section. I've been in it once because I'm a photographer on the field at ASU games, but the best environment I've ever been in was, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago. I was actually at an Ohio State-Michigan game at the Horseshoe when Ohio State won. So that was one of the most raucous, incredible environments I've ever been in. Obviously, one of the best rivalries.
Wasn't the one time you were in the student section last year, though, for that Cal game?
It was the Cal game.
That was a great game.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I mean, I think probably like it's two parts. As Josh mentioned, at a SC game, fantastic. I think being at this year's Rose Bowl between SC and Penn State for experience-wise, that was, best game I've seen. But like enjoyment-wise, it has to be ASU because I'm sure there's other great student sections around the country, but the student sections at ASU, they pack them tight, and those games they're hype. I mean, you're on your feet the entire game. It's like 100 degrees out. You're going nuts. It's nothing but just offense, offense, offense. I highly recommend anyone. I mean, an Arizona State football game, that you gotta go, and don't go into the regular stance. If you're coming down, hit one of us up, and we'll get you in the student section because that's the way to go.
My favorite, like yesterday when we were playing TCU, it was crazy. I mean, first of all, I've never seen so many people so confused and mad at one time in my life.
Yeah, I'd probably be the exact same way if I was getting upset by TCU. But so you were at the game yesterday?
Yes, it was crazy. I mean, the student section in Stillwater, I mean, we fill about 7 different sections with students just standing, packed in, I mean, and then we have the paddle people who just lose their minds, and it's incredible. But the game was just wild and crazy, and everyone was pretty upset. I can tell you that we weren't happy.
So, I mean, I don't know if you've been to other different environments, but would you say Oklahoma State is probably your favorite college football environment?
Well, I went to Bedlam last year in Norman, and all of the OU fans were really they were nice up until the game started, and then they hated us. So that was fun. But I remember, I've been to some when OSU baseball. We had the College World Series here some years. I mean, we packed the place in our 3,000 maybe high school stadium of a baseball field, and then whenever we play Kansas, for whatever reason, whenever we play Kansas in basketball, we pack the arena at Gallagher-Iba, and it's just wild. So, it's a great atmosphere, and if you come down, no matter where you sit, it's just so much fun to watch a game in Stillwater.
All right. Definitely, that's on our list of places to go. What's your next question for us?
So, after the loss to TCU yesterday, the saddening loss, what's your opinion on if TCU is legit, and also can OSU, Oklahoma State, get back into the college football playoff race?
We actually touched upon this kind of earlier in the show, but I think for Oklahoma State, this is actually a good loss. I mean, there's no such thing as good losses, but I think this is definitely a good one. I feel losing early in the year, especially to TCU at home, in the long run is going to help them out. I think it'll better prepare themselves for future games. For TCU, I'm still not 100% sold on them. I think they're a very good team, but I'm not sure if they'll be able to compete for the Big 12 title. We'll have to wait and see, but that's my thing. But I think for Oklahoma State, especially, first things first, I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, totally. And the refs didn't help us. I hate blaming games on the refs, but there was a span of about 15 minutes where they had to review 3 calls that made no sense at all.
Yeah, I remember I was watching it. There were definitely some questionable ones. But I think, like I said, Oklahoma State, it's early on in the season. I think they'll be more than fine.
Yeah, let's hope so.
All right, but my man, I appreciate you staying up. I appreciate you calling in. And if Oklahoma State, they turn this thing around, we'll definitely be hearing from you once again.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right, my man, you have yourself a good week.
All right, you too, man. Take care.
This one comes from the 20 gauge. All right, what do you guys think about his playoff system that he proposed? The winner of every Power 5 conference gets a playoff spot. Then there are 3 more spots, 3 wild cards. If a team like Western Michigan from last year or Boise State were to go undefeated, they get an automatic 8 seed. But if you're not, really, Josh? But if you're not in a Power 5 conference, then you have to go undefeated. So there's either 2 or 3 wild card spots, depending on if a non-Power 5 can go undefeated, and that the committee decides who gets in. So the playoff from last season would have been Alabama, Penn State, Washington, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Western Michigan, plus 2 wild cards, probably Ohio State and Oklahoma. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I was all for it until I heard that the non-Power 5 teams have to win out, because that means Notre Dame has to win out every year. So never mind. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I think there are some flaws with it. I think it's a good idea, but I think there are some flaws with it, so I'm going to say no.
I think the base of it is really good. I think you're in the right mindset. I think you're in the right place, but like Lyle said, having the teams have to go undefeated, that's the big hindrance of it.
I think it should be the winner of the 5 power schools should be in.
I agree with that.
And then you take 3 of whoever the next best records are. And then I think it should be the top. Well, I remember we talked about this once before. Was it the top?
See,
who gets the buys? Or
I don't know.
No one gets buys.
This is what I thought. You take 6 teams, because if you do 8, it's just a lot of football. You do 6 teams. Teams 1 and 2 get buys. And then those playoff games are played at the very beginning of the bowl season. So right after conference championships, you have the first 2 playoffs. So then you actually get a Rose Bowl. You actually get whatever. That way you don't have a team winning the Rose Bowl and the national championship in the same year, which I think is absolutely stupid.
No, I like that. It's almost similar to the baseball setup where the 2 teams play in the wild card game.
Well, that does wrap up this week's Q&A. A lot of great questions, so once again, thank you to everyone who asked each question. But Lyle, do me the honor of ringing the bells. A lot of people were very happy last week when we started ringing them, so they are officially back. Lyle, get it.
Ring those bells. I'm not surprised that people are happy to have the bells back. I loved them all last year.
Did you guys not like my joke last week, asking if he's a hunchback of Notre Dame because he's like a Notre Dame fan and bells? And
Before we get to the pick'ems, make sure you join the official Harris Highlights Pick'em League. Every week, pick the winner of 10 matchups and compete with hundreds of viewers, including us. Well, I don't even know if Lyle does it anymore or if Brady does it anymore. I know Josh does it because he's actually second in the league. But the rest of you guys, I don't know what in the world is going on.
I always do it. I'm just not making good picks.
The winner receives a $25 gift card of their choice. The link to sign up is in the description below. Guys, as always, we touch up on who is currently in the lead. And as of right now, we have a three-way tie between Travis 1021, Will Rod 1025, and someone who didn't create a username, which is ESPN 421008031. They all have 32 correct pick'ems, and then we got Josh down here. He's somewhere. He's got 31. So Josh, you're one away from taking the lead of the pick'ems. But speaking of taking the lead for the pick'ems, you are now leading our group of pick'ems. I know I always build up the suspense, but I thought that was actually a kind of cool lead-in right there. But Josh is currently in the lead with 28, but he's also in the lead with Lyle with 28. So you're not in first yet, bud. And then there's good old Brady and I, which are, I guess you could say, tied for second with 25.
I like the sound of second. Also, one more thing going back to that. Even if Josh does win, Josh can't win the gift card because that's a conflict of interest, Blake.
I'm playing for pride.
Our first pick'em of the week is number 5 USC at number 16 Washington State.
Oh, this game is going to be very aggravating. It's on a Friday, and USC only plays well on Saturdays most of the time even. So I'm not expecting much from SC. I think they get the job done, but I think it's a close game in Pullman. Washington State's a good team.
I think the fact that it's in Pullman is going to make it an even tougher game, and maybe that's stating the obvious, but Pullman's a tougher place to play than people might think. So I think USC gets the win. I'll say by a touchdown. It's going to be very close.
I think USC is going to come in and pull off, not an upset, but I'm going to say upset because it's on an away field against the right team.
The thing I really hate about this week's matchup is that it's on a Friday, because if this was on a Saturday, this would have to be, without a doubt, this week's game day, which would be the first time Pullman has ever gotten it. They're well known for having the Wazoo flag at every game day, so I'm just very bummed that it's not, because that would have made a great game day. Very tough place to play, as Josh mentioned. USC's not good, especially on Thursdays or Fridays, but I think USC does get this one done. Number 14, Miami at Duke.
I'm going to go Miami in this one. I don't think I've seen enough from Duke to really think that they are going to be able to compete with the Hurricanes in this one. Miami's the better team. They get it done.
I think Miami's a team that's very good and a lot of people don't know about yet. You look at their quarterback in Malik Rozier and their running back in Mark Walton, both very high caliber players, and I think Miami pulls out a win.
Listen, I think Miami can do really well in this game at Duke, so I'm going to go with Miami.
Duke gets the upset at home and they go to 5-0. Number 7, Georgia at Tennessee.
Close game. Neyland Stadium is a very tough environment. They're going to be rocking in Knoxville despite a little bit of a disappointing game this past week. Georgia gets it done, and it's going to be another thriller just like it was last year.
I think Georgia gets it done, but I think it's going to be at least a 2-touchdown victory with the way Tennessee showed themselves for this season. Like I said, they won by 4 against UMass, who's arguably the worst team in all of FBS.
I'm going to go with Tennessee as well. I think I'm actually going with Tennessee in this one. Not as well, but Tennessee, like we've talked about, has some of the best home field advantage in college football, so I'm going to have them with an upset over Georgia this week.
Georgia by at least 17. Florida State at Wake Forest.
Florida State gets it done, no question. They're going to have a good bounce-back win this week.
Blackman throws for 250 yards, and Florida State gets their first win, and they win by 21.
They're not going to be defeated anymore. They'll get their first win this weekend. We saw Blackman have a lot of poise this past week, but I think he's going to take over as a true leader of this team. Florida State's going to win.
Wake Forest is undefeated, and they're going to remain undefeated, and they're going to go 5-0. I do not like Florida State. Losing Francois, I think, hurts them tremendously, and I don't think they get it done. I'm telling you, do not sleep on Wake Forest. They're going 5-0.
Oh, geez, add this to the list with Rosen and Ruiz and everything else.
Number 24, Mississippi State at number 13, Auburn.
Auburn gets it done. It's going to be a good game, but the fact that this game is at home for the Tigers, I think is a huge momentum factor in this game. I think the Tigers get it done.
I don't think Mississippi State is everything Blake was hyping him up to be. I say Auburn gets the win, and Jarrett Stidham is the X factor.
Auburn is going to get this win at home against Mississippi State. Simple as that.
I don't know which Mississippi State is going to show up. Probably going to go with Auburn in this one. Memphis at UCF.
Well, UCF had a really big win over the Terps this weekend, and I thought that they were very impressive because I thought Maryland had been very impressive. So I don't know if I was wrong about Maryland or if UCF is just a good team. Bottom line, I think Memphis figures out a way to get it done against the Golden Knights, or is it just the Knights? Whatever it may be, I think the Tigers get it done, just like my last pick.
Memphis is just outside the top 25 right now, and I think they get a win this week over UCF.
I think UCF's going to get this home win this week because why the hell not?
I think Memphis gets this done. They're the better team. South Carolina at Texas A&M.
South Carolina wins the game. South Carolina wins the game handedly. Texas A&M is not a very good football team. Unfortunately, I don't think the Aggies have what it takes to stay in this football game.
I think this game's going to be very close, but I actually like Texas A&M in this game.
I'm with you, Lyle, because I'm going to go Texas A&M. They need a big win to get themselves propelled towards the end of the season. I'm going with the Aggies.
2 words. Sco Cox. Number 15, Oklahoma State at Texas Tech.
This is going to be a shootout. The Red Raiders and the Cowboys, guns blazing. Cowboys are going to get a big bounce back win, but look for Nick Shimonek and the Red Raiders to keep this thing close. This is going to be an absolute thriller.
Gonna be a thriller for, I'll say, 3.5 quarters, and Oklahoma State pulls away at the end.
Oklahoma State's going to come in and get the upset because, like I said, away game, I always think of it as an upset. But I'm going to think Oklahoma State's going to come in and beat Texas Tech on the road.
A part of me really wants to take Texas Tech because they are on the outskirts of the top 25, but I'm not going to be that bold. I'm going to take Oklahoma State in this one. Now, arguably, the game of the week, number 2 Clemson at number 12 Virginia Tech. It is going to be in prime time. Guys, a lot of people are taking Virginia Tech to knock off Clemson. Now, the question is, are you guys?
I am not. I would like to see it happen. I don't think it happens. I love upset games unless I have picked the other team to do big things. I don't think Clemson is going to pull away in this one like they did this week. Again, Virginia Tech is a lot better than who they played this week. It's close for 3.5 quarters until the very end when Clemson just steps down and figures out how to pull this thing out at the end.
I think this game's going to be much tougher for Clemson, especially the fact that it's on the road in a tough environment like Virginia Tech. I think Clemson gets the win, but Kelly Bryant has to be much more efficient than he was against Boston College this past weekend.
Well, Kelly Bryant's only thrown 2 touchdowns this season in comparison to Josh Jackson's thrown 11. But I do think that Clemson's a more complete team, so I'm going to go with Clemson in this game.
We know what my thoughts were on Clemson last year, guys, and we know what my thoughts are on them this year. But for some reason, I like Virginia Tech. I like them at home. They seem to be climbing up the leaderboards for everyone for beating Clemson and taking that ACC title. I'm going to go with the Hokies on this one. And now we go to the worst of the worst, the game that you could not, absolutely not pay us to watch or even go to. And this week, boys, that is Akron at Bowling Green.
Akron versus Bowling Green. This game is at Bowling Green, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Okay. Akron and Bowling Green. Now, Bowling Green, somebody brought this up last year. Now, I just happen to be one of the best bowlers on the planet.
This was me that brought it up last year.
Oh, was it? I'm the best bowler on the planet. And if you think you can take me down, then you're probably right. But the thing that I don't get is even though I like bowling, Bowling Green's colors are orange and brown. So, there's no green. There's no bowling. I hope they have a bowling team. Probably not D1. So for that matter, I'm taking Bowling Green anyway. I like bowling, and I like their color scheme, even though it's ugly just like the Cleveland Browns.
Well, this week in Lyle's intense preparation for the worst of the worst, Akron versus Bowling Green. LeBron's from Akron. LeBron's successful. Akron's going to be successful. Akron gets the win.
One of my best friends from home goes to Akron, and she's a swimmer, and she's on a scholarship and has her school paid for. And I'm really jealous because free tuition, hashtag at ASU. By the way, Josh, Bowling Green has a club bowling team. So it's not D1, but they still got a bowling team. But since it's not D1, I'm going with Akron.
I like bowls, and I think that ASU is going to go bowling this year, so I'm going to go with Bowling Green. But speaking of ASU, guys, we traveled to Stanford this week for a great game. A very early game, our earliest game of the year. I believe it's at 1 p.m. Our time. Guys, do we ride this momentum all the way out and get a 2-game winning streak, or do we just start another losing streak and just ride that one out?
See, just because ASU had this big win over Oregon, a very good team, and a big bounce-back performance for the Devils, I just don't think they're going to go into Stanford and get the win. Now, I do think they're going to be close. I think they keep it close for at least 3 quarters. I think it's an interesting game, and I was going to go to this game. I'm no longer going to the game, and so for that reason alone, I'm going to take the Stanford Cardinal in this one.
This is going to be a good game, but I think this actually might be a game that favors ASU. So ASU is now playing a lot hotter than I thought they would be. With their running game, the way they established it over this past weekend against Oregon, I think they're going to run the ball a lot, give a lot of inside pitches to Kalen Ballage and DeMario Richard. And because of that established run game, I think the Arizona State Sun Devils blaze by the Stanford Cardinal.
This is a really interesting game. ASU played really solid this past week against Oregon. Stanford's been up and down. They've been on a roller coaster ride this season. I think the Sun Devils are going to keep their hot streak going from this past week, knocking off 24th ranked Oregon, the first wins against a ranked opponent since 2015 for the Devils, but I think they're going to come into Palo Alto and knock off Stanford in this game.
Now, ASU always does this to us. They'll lose a game, and we'll say they're losing every game the rest of the season.
You will say that.
I say that. They win, I say, well, we're going undefeated, and we want Bama. Guys, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to ride this momentum, and I'm going to ride it all the way, and I'm going to take the Arizona State Sun Devils to knock off Stanford. I think they can get it done. Josh mentioned, if ASU can run on Stanford, we have a good chance. Because they're going to be torching that secondary up, especially if they finally want to go to N'Keal Harry maybe more than 10 times a game. But I think they get this done, guys. I'm an optimist.
What I'm worried about for Arizona State is the fact that I have no faith in this defense containing Bryce Love. And I know that they're probably going to see a different quarterback because there was Keller Christ and now it's Costello. So I don't really know what the quarterback situation is going to be. However, I think that ASU keeps it close because of their offense.
Fun fact, in ASU's first 5 games, they're facing 3 of the top 5 leaders in the nation in rushing yards, with Bryce Love, who's currently number 1 in the nation, with Rashad Perry and Royce Freeman, who had a pretty bad game the other night, but that's okay. But Bryce Love, they're going to have to contain him, but we will have to wait and see. Well, that does wrap up this edition of the Harris Highlights Show. If you're interested in owning some Harris Highlights merch, Christmas is right around the corner. Santa is coming this year, guys. Lyle, maybe not for you. Today is your lucky day. Pick up some Don't Sleep on Chattanooga, Zane for Heisman, and other official Harris Highlights merchandise today. The link for all that is in the bio below. Also, once again, this episode was presented by SeatGeek. Head on over there and get $20 off your first purchase, but remember, you got to enter the promo code Harris Highlights. That is one word, and that's how you'll get the deal. Also, we're giving away that Pro Football Focus subscription. It's the final week, so make sure you go over and you enter and you give yourself a chance to win. From Josh Schaefer, Lyle Goldstein, and Brady Klein from beautiful downtown Phoenix, this is Blake Harris signing off, and we'll see you guys next week.